Hey everyone. Obviously, shout if you can hear me. I can hear me there actually, so that's not so bad. But thank you very much for coming along to Knots IoT. We've not got a huge amount of people in person. In fact, there's probably more actual staff than there is attendees, but that's okay. It's one-on-one
Hey
questions
everyone,
at that point, and there's me speaking in the background.
hear me. I can hear me there actually.
I'm streaming this live on YouTube, which is the reason why you can hear that, and that's disappeared. But yeah, so we are back in person or hybrid actually for the first time in, I don't know, must be 2 years, something like that. I think we had Cliff Aegis come up with his robotic hand the last time we did this before the pandemic. So it is nice to be back. Hopefully we'll start getting more in-person speakers coming along and more folks can enjoy pizza and things like that. So moving on, this is a friendly meetup, so do be nice to everyone. There's lots of words on there, but really just be nice and we'll have a good evening. Thanks very much to our sponsors. We're here in the Rebel offices in Nottingham, so they're an awesome crowd of folks who do loads of decent hiring in the Nottingham and wider area as well, all over the place. So do check them out. They're very kindly paying for the food and the drink tonight too, as well as where we're standing here. But for you folks, you don't get to enjoy that because you've come along remotely, but that's okay. That's good. You can enjoy it too. Calix and JetBrains and PJG Creations are also sponsoring. JetBrains, if you tweet on the hashtag NotsIoT tonight, then one lucky person will win a license for a single JetBrains product for 12 months, courtesy of JetBrains themselves. If you don't know what JetBrains do, then they make developer tools for developers. So things like Rider and IntelliJ and ReSharper and things like that. So tweet on the hashtag NotsIoT to be with a chance of winning one of their products for 12 months. Calix, they're going to give away a single piece of IoT kit, which I will ask Paul to choose. He may well choose something that's on here, I guess, would be an opportunity, but either way, we'll choose something for somebody to win, again, if you tweet on the hashtag NotsIoT. I myself am a Microsoft MVP, which means that through my community contributions and other things that I do, we get into this special program with Microsoft to be able to get closer to the product groups that make the tools that you and I love to use. If that's something that interests you through community contributions and things like that, then get in touch. I'm happy to speak to you about that program. So tonight we've got Paul Barker talking about open source IoT with ThingsBoard and Sandtrack. And then coming up at the end of this month, all being well, we need confirmation on this. So this is subject to change, but we should have Simon Painter talking about functional C# at .NET Knots over at BGSS at the end of the month. So definitely go check that out. When we release that link will work once I've made the meetup, once we've got confirmation that he's going to speak. And with that, a couple of bits of self-promotion. If IoT is your thing, then I've made a Pluralsight course on the Microsoft IoT stack. So do go check that out. And a few of us here, actually, Misha's not here tonight, but Misha Bell, who also works at Rebel, and a few other folks, we make a podcast called the Agile Engineering Podcast. So if DevOps and Agile Engineering is something you're interested in, then do go check that out. And with that, I can stop sharing and self-promoting and let Paul do the interesting part of the evening. So we'll catch you in a bit.
Hello. Got some echo, so I think we're working. Cool. Do you want to mute that, Pete? Brilliant. So I will share my screen.
That's good.
Cool. So, yeah, nice to be here in person. And today I'm going to talk to you about open source IoT with Thingsboard and Soundtrack. So I've got some slides, I'm going to go through those, and then I have a bit of a demo that I'm going to do for the second half of the presentation. Am I right that we're running about an hour? Yeah. About an hour. So yeah, run for about half an hour through the slides, and then run through as much of a demo as I have time for, and then we can finish up with Q&A and a bit of a chat through things. Yeah, so how are we going to do people online asking questions?
I'll just shout them
You
out.
relay them. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So let's get into things. So a little bit of front matter there. I think I'll share a link to the presentation after the event, because there's a couple of links to click through, but if anybody wants the links, I can share them as well. So talk outline, I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to what we're talking about. Going to introduce you what these things are, what is Thingsboard, what is Soundtrack. We're going to talk about what the deployment options for these services are. And then we're going to talk about the things you can do with these services. So in terms of IoT, we can do telemetry collection, we can do data analysis using a sort of low-code type development environment. We can do alerting, we can do data visualization. So all the usual kind of things you want to do with IoT data. I'm going to talk a little bit about access management and security, some of the security options that we make available in the partnership we've got with Micron to improve the security on our devices. I'm going to talk about the IoT Gateway, which is a product within sort of Thingsboard suite that allows you to connect very low-powered devices up to the IoT platform. And then I'm going to give a bit of a demo and have time for Q&A. So about me. I am Principal Software Engineer at SoundCloud Limited. My background is electronics and computer systems, and I work across the whole sort of embedded Linux stack. That's my area of expertise. So bootloader, kernel, device-side services, system integration. Tend to be focused on the sort of low-level software development side, but stepping a little bit further up the stack today to talk about our IoT things. SoundCloud, well, SoundCloud is a IoT and hardware development company. We build custom and off-the-shelf embedded / IoT hardware. And there's a photo here of one of our boards with a bit of annotation of all the different bits that are on it. We also have a product called Soundtrack, which is a cloud-hosted or on-site IoT platform. We're a very open source focused company, so we contribute to open source software. We use a lot of open source software. It's really primary in what we do and what we think distinguishes us from some of the other players in this area. We've got a global customer base, but we've got a UK head office that's actually up in Manchester, but teams kind of spread around the UK a little bit. I work remotely from Nottingham, and the website is soundcloud.com. So feel free to go and check us out. So just a little bit more about our hardware. So the main product we've got is at the minute is the BeagleBone Enhanced, and this is based on the open hardware BeagleBone product. It's based on a Texas Instruments processor, sort of 32-bit single core ARM device. We've got a couple of different variants of this. So we've got a standard variant, a light variant that drops the HDMI and Wi-Fi, and we've got some industrial variants as well. We're working on next generation designs at the minute, which will be 64-bit ARM-based systems, up to 4 cores each, much more powerful, but we've got two kind of different directions we're going with that. We've got a cost-effective solution and a high-performance solution, both in development. We also build various kind of add-in boards that plug into these boards, and we frequently design custom hardware for clients, whether that's sort of a custom add-in board with some custom sensors on it and actuators, or whether it's a complete custom board for particular customers. So yeah, got quite a lot of capability in the hardware space. So let's talk IoT. I assume most people know what IoT is, this being an IoT thing, but IoT is one of those phrases that kind of sometimes means different things to different people. So I just put up the Wikipedia definition. You can read it yourself. I'm not going to read that to you. But the thing with IoT is, what I'm interested in talking about is the IoT platform. So this is the system that the devices connect to. So you've got your IoT devices, whether they're an off-the-shelf product or a custom piece of hardware, whether it's domestic or industrial, whatever it is. We've got some sort of IoT platform on the internet that these devices will connect to and talk to. And the major cloud providers all offer an IoT platform. So Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Azure all have IoT platforms. There's also, I think, Oracle and Cisco and a couple of other companies have their own IoT platform. So there are many, many options available. And today I'll be talking to you about Soundtrack, and I'll be talking to you about ThingsBoard. And the reason I'm talking to you about these platforms is because I think that owning your data is very, very important. So whether that's a device that is used in domestic IoT device, or it's in some sort of industrial deployment, you've got to be cognizant that when you're using a major cloud platform, you are handing them all of your data if you are sending attributes and telemetry and other IoT data up to that cloud platform. So you're handing over that important asset that is your data to Microsoft, Google, Amazon, if you're using their platforms. And you know, this might be personal data, this might be commercially sensitive data. And what I would say is, you know, working with smaller providers of IoT platforms allows you to have more explicit discussion of how data is stored, where it's stored, how it's processed. And you know, we're also able to offer things like on-site deployment of an IoT platform, so that data would never leave your actual building if you don't want it to, but you can still have all the benefits of an IoT system. There are also self-hosted deployments you can do, where if you've got the IT skills, you can deploy the software entirely yourself, so you can keep the whole thing in-house. That does come with a bit of a cost in terms of upfront investment, but you know, in a lot of cases, that's an investment that is worth making. So I'm going to talk to you about ThingsBoard. So this that's playing at the minute is a sort of brief demo of the ThingsBoard system using this low-code development tool to build what they call rule chains. And you've got different ways that you can represent IoT data, from maps to charts and graphs and things. Should all be fairly familiar if you've used any IoT frameworks before. I think they've all got fairly similar capabilities. But yeah, this is ThingsBoard. So ThingsBoard is an open source IoT platform. So they do have a proprietary professional edition, but the community edition is fully open source. And open source means that the source code for this software is available. You don't have to pay anyone to use this. You don't have licensing concerns. You can run this yourself. It's a scalable solution from deployments with an individual device connected up to tens or hundreds of thousands of devices. It supports single or multi-tenant deployments, and it allows you to provision and manage IoT devices as well as collecting device attributes, collecting telemetry. And it's got this feature called rule chains, which you saw briefly in the little demo video there, that allow you to design your data processing pipeline using a low-code solution. So we'll look at those a little more later. And also visualize the data using what they call dashboards, as well as controlling devices. It's got lots and lots of minor features. I don't have the space or time to cover every single one. If you Google ThingsBoard, you'll find their website. They've got some pretty good documentation on there. and examples and things to show you what they're capable of. And then Sandtrack. Well, what is Sandtrack? Sandtrack is our commercial offering from SandCloud. And this is built on top of the ThingsBoard open source base. So as I say, SandCloud very much focused on using open source tools. And what we do is we bundle in additional services on top of that open source offering, and we will fully manage a Sandtrack instance for you. That can be a shared deployment where you have sort of a tenancy, the same way you have a tenancy within something like Azure or AWS. It can also be we can spin up an entirely separate instance of Sandtrack just for you that only has your data on it in a completely isolated database. So we can do extensive customization, configuration, and extension of the platform. We can build the widgets that you see on the dashboards to customize those. We do back-end extensions, so we've got expertise in Java, JavaScript development, C development, and everything else. So we can do extensions on the back end, on the device side, and we can do integrations with other services. So basically, I see that we can be a partner organization in whatever IoT deployment you want to do. And the benefit of building on an open source solution like ThingsBoard is that you've got all these benefits, but you also have very little lock-in. You know, this is using open technologies, and you can port things to ThingsBoard open source edition if you want to as well. So you don't really get locked in with this solution very well. We want people to stay customers because of the benefits we provide, not because that we've locked them in. So yeah, different deployments that we can do. So simplest way to get started is kind of cloud-based deployment, and this is the sort of thing you'd see with a lot, you know, for a lot of other IoT platforms, this would be your only option. And there are many options for this on the market. Sandtrack, we offer cloud-based deployment of Sandtrack. As I say, that can be as part of a multi-tenant solution, or it can be a completely isolated deployment of Sandtrack. We will, you know, bring up hardware and manage that for you if you want to make sure that it's completely isolated. But the other things we can do, and the things that we can do with ThingsBoard and Sandtrack that, you know, you can't necessarily do with some of the major cloud providers' IoT platforms, is we can provide on-site and self-hosted deployments, which would allow you to keep total control of your data. So we can deploy and manage an on-site installation for you. We can do the you know, systems administration and management of that system remotely for you, but it will keep all your data on site. With the ThingsBoard open source offering, you can completely self-host that yourself if you want to make sure that nobody other than you can access the system that's got your data on it. So that, I think, is really, really powerful. And coming back to what I said earlier, that allows you to own your data, have control over your data. The on-site deployments, you know, the sort of things we're talking about in terms of commercial solutions is, you know, you go as far as something like vaccine manufacture, pharmaceutical manufacture. You know, the data that's coming, you know, you might want to put some automation and IoT solutions within the manufacturing process. But you do not want a situation where competitors can get at that data. You do not want a situation where that introduces security vulnerabilities into that manufacturing pipeline. So it's those cases where we see on-site deployments as being a kind of unique selling point for what we're doing. So enough about deployment. Move into what can we actually do with this technology. And some of these things will be familiar with other IoT platforms. So you'll be able to see how the capabilities kind of compare and contrast. So the two main things from an IoT perspective in terms of getting data in is this idea of telemetry and attributes. And these are essentially key value pairs of data that come from the device. So they can be typed, so you can have strings, integers, floating point numbers, booleans, and you can also have more structured data being sent up as well. The difference between the telemetry and the attributes is that with telemetry, that's things we expect to vary over time, and we store the historical data for visualization and analysis. With attributes, we really only care about the current version. We kind of expect things to change a little less often. So a telemetry value might be temperature, a device attribute might be, the serial number of the device. And for the attributes, we've got 3 scopes that are supported within ThingsBoard and Samtrack. You can have server attributes set by the server, you can have client attributes set by the client, and you can have shared attributes that allow communication between the two. And then I want to talk about the rule chains. So once we've got some attributes in or some telemetry in, we want to be able to process the data. And these rule chains are a low-code solution. So you can design the data flow pipeline in a visual tool in the browser. And this has got various features. So it allows real-time processing of telemetry and of changes to device attributes. It's often a no-code solution, but it's technically low-code because you can drop blocks in there for complex data processing using JavaScript. And use cases for this is data validation and modification of the data. So you might want to compute something based on the telemetry that comes in and then store that computational result. You might want to trigger some remote procedure calls from the IoT platform down to some service that's running on a device. Or you want to want to make some API calls to integrate with other online services. And we can also trigger alarms, send emails, provide notifications from the system. And in terms of alerting, these alerts can be raised based on attributes or telemetry that come in terms of raw values of the telemetry. Or you can do some data processing in the rule chain and you can base the alerts on the results of that. And these alerts can be made in various ways. So we're going to talk about dashboards in a minute. You can make visual alerts on the dashboards, but you can also do things like send people emails, send people text messages, which is important if somebody needs to respond to one of these alerts and might not actually be looking at the dashboard when the alert happens. And you can use third-party services for alerting via API calls. So, off the top of my head, things like PagerDuty is a system that's used within IT to have an on-call rotation of who is actually on call at the minute to respond if there's a problem. So you could, use an API call to integrate with that and send an alert to whoever is currently on call. So dashboards, this is the visual part of the talk. So you want to be able to present data that comes in from devices. This is an example of a dashboard taken off the ThingsBoard website. You can build graphs, you can build tables, you can build analog style gauges. You can also show things like a floor plan of a facility and have icons for where the devices are and what their current status is. You can build you can integrate with maps and all sorts of other things. Basically, whatever way you can think of visualizing the data, you can do with a dashboard. So as I say, there's lots of ways to show the data. You've got analog displays, digital displays, that can be shown. You can show tables, dials, gauges, anything like that. Now, have coloured indicators and icons. You can have maps, charts, whether that's pie charts or graphs. And in terms of graphs, you can also graph historical data. So, as I said, with telemetry, we keep historical data, and that allows you to plot a graph of, how a particular reading, be it a temperature or a pressure or something else, has varied over time. You can look at maybe the last hour, or you can go back to say, give me a graph of between 3 and 4 p.m. yesterday as to what this sensor was reading. And that's really quite powerful for being able to just visually inspect the data. Data can be post-processed for display. That means if you've got some analysis that depends on the data being in a particular form, you can still kind of post-process it to transform it into a nice form for visualization. And the dashboards, much like the rule chains, you can design and edit things in the browser. And it's worth adding, there's a lot of these things, they're called widgets in ThingsBoard parlance. Most of these, there's a lot of these already built into the system that can be deployed in either ThingsBoard or Samtrack. But what we have in Samtrack is we have additional widgets that we've designed as well, and we can customize those for people. So as well as data visualization, dashboards also allow you to do remote control of devices. So we have lots of different widgets for control available, same as lots for visualization. We have switches, buttons, sliders, tick boxes, selection lists, lots of those things. We can also have text entry. So if you need to enter the name of something or a date or a number or something else, you can have widgets that allow that. You can have maps that, as well as showing the data, that allow you to click on a location to enter that location. And we've also got advanced sort of administration widgets to allow you to add devices, update devices, change settings of a gateway, all these kind of things. And then this input that you do via the dashboard, that can be used to update server-side attributes and to trigger things happening in rule chains that you've built. So you can trigger actions to take place that way. But it can also be used to trigger remote procedure calls to device-side services. So this is the way you do things where if you have if you've got a lock on a door that's controlled by a device, you can have the IoT platform send a remote procedure call to say, right, lock the door, unlock the door, in response to the controls that people have pressed on the dashboard. So this allows remote control of devices. Other features that we've got within Samtrack and ThingsBoard, we support multi-tenancy and multi-customer deployments. So this separates out users, devices, dashboards, and other assets between what are referred to as tenants. And a tenant is, a collection of users and devices and dashboards and things. If you think about something like Amazon Web Services, there is one instance of AWS globally, but when you log in, you see your tenancy, you just see the things that belong to you within the system. So we support a similar idea, and a tenant can only access their own data, their own devices, their own dashboards. But we do go a step further than this. So a tenant can have customers who can have a further restricted view of the data. And a customer can have multiple user accounts. So way to think about this is if you built an IoT device that, let's say allowed control of door locking, since that's the example I used a minute ago. you could be, door locking mechanisms incorporated and have your tenancy within a system. You could have 1,000 different devices that lock doors, and you could then have customers who buy your devices and put them on their doors. So you would have your tenancy, you would have your customers, and your customers would only be able to see their locks and interact with their locks. So it's this kind of multi-tiered mechanism, allows a huge amount of flexibility. It allows you to do things like that. It also allows you to do things in terms of supply chain. So you can have, a device manufacturer might have a particular view, the device reseller might have a more restricted view, and an end user might have a further restricted view of things. Allows a lot of flexibility. And then we come to what I think is a very important thing within IoT is security. And from my point of view, I think that with IoT, you need to consider security in 3 different parts. You need to consider the server-side security. So in terms of, a stand track deployment, this is something that we manage. We make sure that the server is secure, that it's up to date, that it's patched, and manage that. And this also encompasses, security of data at rest in a database on the server. You've also got transport security. This is something people also think about, HTTPS, secure, encrypted transmission of data from a device to the IoT platform and of control signals from the IoT platform down to the device. And one thing that is sometimes not on people's radar as much as it should be is the device side security. And I think device side security is very important. It's important if your device is connected to some sort of, a door locking mechanism, because if the device gets compromised, someone could unlock the door without authorization. But it's also important in terms of the telemetry and the attributes that's sent from the device to the IoT platform. No amount of processing or artificial intelligence or analysis on the server side is going to do any good if the server can't trust the data that's sent by the client. And if a device is compromised, it can be sending, fake data up to the IoT platform. And you do need to think about risk profile here. So, if you've got a domestic heating control system, well, if it reports the wrong temperature, maybe it costs you a bit of money because the heating turned on where it wasn't supposed to. Fairly low risk. Physical access control system, medium to high risk. We don't want these devices to be compromised and to report that a door is locked when it's actually unlocked. But you go all the way up to, automation of something like pharmaceutical manufacture, and that is a very high risk. If a device that's controlling some part of manufacturing flow is compromised, then you can change what pharmaceutical gets manufactured. We do not want that. So there's a wide variety of risk profiles, and you need to make sure that the security system that you deploy matches up with the risk profile for your deployment. And what we've done with SoundCloud is we've partnered with Micron. So Micron are a memory device manufacturer predominantly, and we're deploying their Authenta flash system. So this combines a security element with a flash memory device. So trying to remember what the Intel processor thing is called, and I can't remember what it's called. What you have on a laptop to ensure that it's secured.
Oh, like HCM or something like that.
Yeah, things like that. It'll come back to me in a minute what the actual thing is. But this so on ARM there's a thing called Trust Zone. Intel has a management engine within the processor as well. So these are different secure elements. TPM, that's the word I was thinking. We've also got, like, on an Apple device, you have secure enclave. This is all the same kind of idea. It is a security element, security processor. What Authenta does is it builds that into the flash. So it acts as a device-side root of trust in the way that we're deploying it within an IoT device. And it allows the credential that the device uses to connect to the IoT platform to be tied to specific contents of the flash memory. So unauthorized modification of what's in that flash memory, i.e. the device side code, will destroy the device side credential. So if somebody does exploit a device and replaces the firmware or the operating system or the application on that device, when it's power cycled and it generates device side secrets again, it will come up with different secrets, and it will no longer have the credential that can be used to connect to the IoT platform. So if the system has logged, if the device has connected with the right credential, you can be confident that it is running the code that you think it's running. And that's really, really valuable, because that means that the device isn't lying to you about the telemetry values that it's sending. With this technology, we also can further restrict writes to the flash. We can have sections of the memory that are append only, so you can't modify data that's previously been written. And we can have sections that require remotely signed writes and can't be modified purely on the device side. And we're working with Micron to get support for this upstream into open source projects like Linux kernel and U-boot bootloader. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about before the demo is the IoT gateway. And this is kind of a view of the IoT gateway deployment. The IoT gateway sits at the edge of a network typically, and it allows devices that have a wide range of connectivity solutions, whether that's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, whether the protocol is MQTT, or whether it's CAN bus within a car, SNMP in terms of networking equipment, any of these things. The gateway is there to kind of wrangle all these different technologies into, one secure connection up to the IoT platform. And yeah, the gateway acts as sort of an IoT hub is another phrase that you see used. It supports multiple protocols, so it can collect data from, if you have an off-the-shelf device that only speaks a particular protocol and you can't modify it, the gateway allows you to integrate that. The gateway also can be used to add this transport security at the edge of a network. And it supports remote configuration and remote logging of information back to the IoT platform. And the IoT gateway solution from ThingsBoard that we use with SoundCloud as well, it's written in Python. It's really easily extensible, so it can be used to run additional code at the edge of a network. So I think that is everything I wanted to cover in terms of slides. So, and we're about halfway through. So is there any questions on the content I've covered in the slides before I move on to some sort of demo?
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat?
Just one question. Do you need to have a gateway as well as the platform? If you say the question again.
Yeah, so the question was, do you need the gateway? Or can you just have a device connecting straight to the cloud? So yeah, you can have a device connecting straight to the IoT platform, provided that the device has internet access. The gateway is useful for much smaller devices that may not have the computational power to run encryption and provide that transport security, or might be an off-the-shelf device that doesn't have internet connectivity. So this device that I've got here, the BeagleBoard Enhanced That currently is just on Wi-Fi and is connecting directly to Soundtrack. But if we had an even smaller device with a little microcontroller that didn't have internet connectivity, we could have a gateway, and the gateway can support, up to as many as hundreds of devices being connected to one gateway, and then the gateway connecting to the IoT platform. Does that answer that pretty well?
I've got a question. So for the on-prem one that you can roll out, how do you deal with devices needing to connect from outside of the premises?
So, I mean, we can do things like set up a VPN connection. And again, the gateway is quite good there because the VPN connection can be from the gateway to the on-premises deployment. But a lot of cases where the on-premises deployment is going to be used is where the devices are on the same premises. And so the data would not go over the internet at all in that case. So, yeah, I think that answers that. Yeah. Anything else? Anything online? Don't be afraid to ask questions. And to give you time to think of some, I'm going to refill my water.
Yeah, do feel free to ask whatever questions you like. In the chat's probably just as easy as anything, to be fair. But there'll be some time for questions at the end anyway.
So now is where we offer collective prayers to the demo gods. And we see if the device had internet an hour ago. See if it still does. I think it does. So
We've ordered pizza for 8 o'clock, by the way.
Brilliant. That gives me some time. So yeah, what I am now screen sharing is Soundtrack, and I have some gauges on a dashboard. What I also want to show is the camera. So I have a camera pointed at a device. That's also working. Brilliant. We like when things work. So I'm going to bring this over here, and I'm going to bring this over this side. So yeah, what I have is a BeagleBone Enhanced, which is the hardware device, and that is currently connected over the Wi-Fi to the internet and is sending data to Soundtrack. And this is our demo Soundtrack instance. So what I should shout out very loudly is, if anybody wants an account on demo.soundtrack, I've been told we can set accounts up for people. Probably not tonight, it'll probably be tomorrow during working hours. But if you drop me an email or a message, and I'll get you in touch with people and we can get demo accounts set up. Yes, I've got a couple of little bar charts here. And to give something that can be, visual connection between real world and device, what I'm plotting is just the readings of the accelerometer that's on the device. So this is a 3-axis accelerometer. And when the device isn't actually accelerating, what it actually shows you is the force of gravity. So currently, there's a small force in the X and Y directions, and there's a 9-point-something force in the Z direction. Acceleration due to gravity, 9.8 meters a second, so we're not too far off. Probably needs some calibration, but it's good enough for now. And the nice thing about accelerometer readings is if I grab the board and turn it over, then the dials change. So we have something that I can fairly easily manipulate and see some change, which is always nice in a demo. Cool. So that's the demo. I think there's a little more to it that I want to show than that. So this is Soundtrack. And if you deploy things board, it's going to look, somewhat similar, somewhat different. But this in particular is Sandtrack, which is the offering we have from SandCloud. What I've got, various tabs down here, I've got a device. So, we can create multiple devices. They can have various credentials they use to connect. We can add things to these devices. We can give them names. We can assign them to customers. These devices have attributes. If I look at the server attributes, we have things like, last connected time, last activity time, these kind of things. We also support client attributes that are sent by the device. There aren't any of those being sent at the minute. But that would be things like we could have the device send its serial number and it would show up here. But what we've got being sent is telemetry. And so we have, the latest telemetry values. The device itself, if I show you the log output, that's probably a little small, but you might be able to read it. So it's just sending a JSON blob with X, Y, and Z values every couple of seconds up to the system, and you can see that that is resulting in the telemetry shown in Sandtrack changing. We have various other things. Device profiles is very useful. Once you've got lots of devices, you can create a profile, which is how you want to treat a particular group of devices to save you having to do the same thing over and over and over again. We have rule chains, which I'll look at in a little bit. But what I want to look at is dashboards. So you can have multiple dashboards, and these dashboards can show data for different different devices. They can show different types of data, and we have one here for the accelerometers. And since it's a single device, when I open this, it's just showing the stuff from one device. But dashboards can have sort of parameters. So you can have one dashboard and then it can be parameterized in terms of, well, which device am I actually showing data from? And dashboards are nice and easy to edit. That's one of the main things that I want to get across to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit this dashboard while we are here. So there's a nice little enter edit mode down the bottom. And so we can do things. We can resize things. We can move them around. And we can move these displays out of the way. So it's really easy to kind of redesign how you want your dashboard to look. These different things, we've got an X, Y, and Z. These are referred to as widgets. So a widget is just a little applet that lives on a dashboard. You can add new widgets. So what I'm going to try to do is add a chart. So we're going to add a time series line chart. So the telemetry that we've got changes over time. So it would be nice to show a graph of it. So we can add one. And I really am doing this live. So I kind of know roughly how this works, but I haven't actually rehearsed this. I want to show you how easy it is to kind of navigate around. So we want to add things from our BBE, and we have some data keys. So we have X, Y, and Z, and ideally we want kind of all of them on our graph, and it's conveniently assigned them different colors. And then we can say add. So I resize this, make it nice. Sometimes with the scrolling, it doesn't quite. There we go. That looks quite nice, and we can full screen this dashboard. So we now have a time series, and it's showing the last minute, but we can also change this to show the last hour. So this will show the change when I turn the board over. We can, if we bring it back to the last minute, we can move the board around again and hopefully see some change. There we go. So it takes a second to update, and that is configurable. But yeah, we can have a line chart that is real-time updating, and we can press this nice tick to save the dashboard. And yeah, this is really nice because it allows people who aren't software developers to customize how they want the data to be visualized. You know, there is also the ability of, in terms of sort of front-end software development, to customize these widgets as well, and do different things. So we can modify a dashboard. Next thing I want to demonstrate is the rule chain. So what we're going to do should be interesting. We're going to open up the root rule chain. So the root rule chain is the thing that happens whenever any new attributes and new telemetry appears into the system. So all we have by default is the data comes in, checks the device profile, and it looks at, well, what type of message did we get? Is it an attribute update? Is it telemetry? Is it a remote procedure call request, or is it something else? And what we have is, you know, typically the flow goes from one node to another, but you can have these kind of branching points where, depending on whether something succeeds or fails, or depending on what type of data you've got, the flow goes in a different way. So you can kind of imagine the payload of some new X, Y, and Z values moving through these blocks. And what we're going to do is we want to do something with the telemetry. So the telemetry is those X, Y, and Z values that come from the device. So we're going to add in a script node. So a script node is one of the reasons why this is a low code environment rather than a no code environment. So if you want to do kind of clever processing of the data as it goes through the pipeline, you can write something in JavaScript that will process some data. And this, you're essentially writing a function body that just gets called with the message that comes in. So what we're going to do, let's try that again. We're going to give this a name, and this is going to be called find largest. So we've got an X, a Y, and a Z. We want to go, well, which one of these is largest at any particular point in time? And what we want to do is we want to say, this is where I'm not a JavaScript developer, so this is going to be fun. We want to say if X is message.x greater than message dot y, and message dot x is greater than message z. Then we want to say largest is x. So if the largest isn't x, we have else if else. Until I don't know JavaScript. But that's the fun. It's you know, it's more interesting if I'm figuring it out as we go along. So then the largest is y, else largest equals z, and we need to say var largest. Cool. And then ideally we want to say message dot largest is our local variable. So in theory, what this does is it figures out which of x, y, and z is the largest value. And then it's going to store it into a new key called largest within the message. And then this message that we've got is going to proceed further along the pipeline. So we're going to add this node. We're going to bring it over here. We're going to bring the save the time series out of the way. We're going to say, well, if we get some telemetry, we're not going to go straight to saving it. We're going to go through this find largest first. And then if it succeeds, we save the telemetry. And we're going to apply the changes. So now we've applied the changes to this. In theory, that node is now there doing its thing. But we want to know, is this thing actually doing what we want it to do? And the way we find out, is it doing what we want it to do? We tick the debug mode. We turn on debug mode, and then we save things. So this node now is in debug mode. And debug mode is great because we see events. So when you're kind of imagining each little payload of telemetry is working its way through this rule chain, it's going to come into this node. Our little function is going to run, and then it's going to come out of the node. So if we look at the data coming in, we have some x, y, and z values came into our little script node. If we look at our data going out, we have our x, y, and z, and then we have a new value called largest, which is, they're all negative. So yeah, in this case, y is actually the largest value of those three. So, you know, this is a fairly trivial example. All I'm doing is saying we've got three different numbers. Which one of those is the largest? Let's create a new telemetry key called largest with that x, y, or z as a string. And then when we look at our device, this device now has latest telemetry, largest is y. If I turn it around and wait a minute, changes to z. So I kind of see these as kind of virtual telemetry. It's not actually telemetry coming from the device. It's something we're calculating in the rule chain. And I've been able to do that with a couple of lines of JavaScript and, you know, putting a script node block down in the rule chain. What we're going to do is we're going to come back to our dashboard and we're going to finish off the story by adding in something new. Let's say we just want to show a string value. Digital gauge. Yeah, no, that's for gauges. We just want Simple card. Simple card sounds nice. Add a data source for the largest value. Bring that over here. And then turn the board over again. And the largest changes to Y. So yeah, we can show the results of something we've done in the rule chain. So yeah, you see how this is really nice in terms of being able to build things at quite a, low code environment, as well as being able to rearrange things in the rule chain, rearrange things in the dashboard without needing to write the code as well. Going back to the rule chain, I do want to show you some of these things. We actually have a node for checking relations between things. We have, some quite complicated ideas built into the rule chain. So something like GPS geofencing. So find out if some GPS coordinates are within a certain area or not. We can switch based on message type. We can run a script, all sorts of different things. We can calculate deltas. So you essentially calculate the difference between a current telemetry value and the previous value. But we can also do what's sort of data enrichment. So if a device belongs to a particular customer, we can bring in attributes of the customer into our processing. The same thing if it relates to something or it's a tenant or something else. So we can kind of enrich our data processing as we go. We can do bits of transformation, and then we can do actions. We can create alarms. We can, do all sorts of different things. We can create log entries. The things that are interesting to me is these external nodes. So these external nodes allow us to interact with other services. So they can be things on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. It can be protocols like MQTT or RabbitMQ, or it can be a good old-fashioned API call. This is the one we tend to use the most. Integrate with another service by calling some API that is exposed over the internet. We can also send emails, send SMS. So this is really nice for being able to integrate things happening within Samtrack with, whatever other tools you want to use. And then we have some basic flow nodes as well, including a rule chain node. So the rule chain node within a rule chain essentially allows you to do a function call. It allows you to transition from one rule chain to another rule chain. So this is the rule chain. We can actually create more rule chains and use them as kind of sub functions. So that is a kind of whirlwind tour of what we can do with devices, dashboards, and rule chains within Samtrack. Any questions on that?
Yeah. What about data storage? If you're in the cloud version, have you got like a time to live on this stuff, or does it?
Yeah, I don't really know the answer to that. Yeah, that would be one I'd have to check with someone who's more familiar with the deployments we've got with more longer term data coming in.
Yeah, it's interesting because you use services that you'll have seen like IoT Central, which would be a poor cousin to some of the stuff that you can do with this. It's pretty powerful. It's like putting Node-RED inside of something like that, really. But you only get 30 days worth of data in IoT Central, so pretty limited. I'm guessing it's longer anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm not sure about is what automation already exists to kind of collect old data. So sometimes you want to downsample old data. So you want like every 3 seconds for the last 48 hours, but then before that, you maybe want one read in every 5 minutes so it doesn't fill your hard drive. On the back end, this is just going into a PostgreSQL database. So there's a lot that can be done there. I don't know what exists straight out of the box. But yeah, we also use Node-RED on the device as well to do some device-side pre-processing for certain deployments as well. So yeah, anything else?
Can you do statistical process?
I'm sure you can. So I don't think there is, drag and drop in nodes in the rule chain for, either a PID control loop or something more statistical. But certainly there is the ability to integrate there. And that's something where what we do with Sandtrack is we have other, we build other services on that run alongside this IoT platform. So we can do more complicated data processing statistics by essentially building a server-side application as a sidecar that sits alongside. Because if you want to do something simple, rule chain's great. If you want to do something with lots of interaction steps and error handling and statistics, you maybe do want an AI model or something else. You don't want to build that in the rule chain. It's not what it's for. It's for, connecting things and doing straightforward processing. So that's where we have a lot of tools that we have within SoundCloud for building up stuff alongside. And that's how we do a lot of the more complicated services for clients. And we use this as the front end. And that's kind of one of our unique selling points as our version versus the open source version.
And what about like windowing functions in those rule chains? Is it just the now data, or can I say if it's been high for the last 10 minutes, it's gone above a threshold? Or
yeah, I've
got all the good questions.
Yeah. So I tend to work on the device side code. So I'm a bit out of my depth in terms of exactly what can be done just straight through the rule chain.
What was that?
What was that checkpoint that you had down at the bottom? What was that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've got calculate delta.
That's true.
And we've got acknowledges checkpoints, and yeah, I don't know. I'll be honest. I think for a lot of this, we would build something alongside that we can implement in a more traditional programming environment for those. Yes, very, very familiar with MATLAB from my university days.
I loved it.
Yeah, I ran away from MATLAB and moved over to Python as soon as I possibly could. But you can do all the same things in Python as you can in MATLAB and more. So yeah, we've got a couple of developers who will build things on the server side alongside to kind of complement the facilities that the rule chain has. So yeah, but we also do work with clients to do some of the control on the device side. So certain bits of control, you don't want the latency of looping around to an IoT platform, or you want it to still be able to do the control locally if the internet connection dies. So we've got the ability to deploy code in the best place. Anything else?
Yeah, is there like a data sheet of quotas and limits and stuff for this service, like the number of devices you're allowed and the number of API calls, the number of SMSs we're allowed to send? And
there is for the things board. So things board will, you can buy a hosted things board service from things board. You obviously don't get all the side extensions that I've been talking about. You can just do things you can do in the rule chain. They have different tiers with different pricing, with different limits, everything else. With Sandtrack, it's much more about a bespoke solution for a customer. So oftentimes we're deploying Sandtrack and we're designing custom hardware for a customer and everything else. So essentially, you know, the limits for our service is all negotiable, and it's on a per customer basis. So it's not really that kind of low touch sales where you just look at a data sheet, click a button, and then you've got it. It is a process of having a conversation, planning something out, and then deploying it. So yeah, that's the way we work as a small company. Much more of a partnership with clients rather than just these are your limits.
Sounds good. And then just a curiosity one, what's edge instances and edge management?
So they have, yeah, they have another thing. This isn't something that I've looked at yet. Edge computing. So they have a version of this that is designed to do distributed data processing. So it's designed to kind of sit alongside the gateway or on another device, and do, you know, deploy some of the same rule engine and dashboard ideas on site, whilst having your bigger instance in the cloud, I think is the idea. So we've looked at it, but we've not done a deployment of it yet, because where we've had on-premises deployments, we've put the whole platform on premises. So, but yeah, it does allow you to split some of the things up. So yeah, there is a lot of features within ThingsBoard and within Sandtrack that we build on top of it that, you know, I've not had chance to go through in this hour. There's a lot more to explore.
Yeah, it looks pretty powerful. I like that rules engine is particularly impressive, actually.
Very, very nice.
Certainly for cloud hosted either PaaS or SaaS services, you don't often get all of that together in one place. That certainly piqued my interest, the ability to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And write your own code in there as well to be able to
Yeah.
add that functionality is pretty powerful too. So
yeah,
I like that.
Cool. For people who are here in person, I do have some flyers about Sandtrack and some business cards. For people who are online, the best thing I recommend you to do is email me. It's let's.
You'd rather put it in the chat, or?
Yeah, let me put it in the chat. How do I? Let's. Stop share. There we go.
Oh no, it's a big me.
Yes, it's a big P. So I'm just going to type in paul.barker@sandcloud.com. There you go. That's my email address. Also going back to.
Oh, you're not sharing anymore, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, paul.barker@soundcloud.com, and I'm also on Mastodon. I'm no longer on Twitter, but I am on Mastodon, so that is the future. So yeah, cool.
I joined Mastodon and then I tried to log back in again and my password wouldn't work, even though I knew what it was, and it won't let me reset it.
Oh, that's no good.
Yeah, very annoying.
Blame whoever's running that instance.
Can't blame Elon Musk for that one.
No. Cool. Right. Cool. Yes. Let's stop share. So yeah, I think I've answered that. Cool. Brilliant. I think we're done.
Yeah, you want to mute yourself?
Cool. So for the folks online, thank you very much for coming along. obviously, don't forget, you've still got time to tweet on that hashtag #NotsIoT. Go ahead and do that if you want to be in with a chance of winning that either piece of IoT tech from Calix or a JetBrains license, from JetBrains. And yeah, we'll see you again. Hopefully we'll sort somebody out for next month. I've not actually got a speaker for next month. But obviously if either of the folks online fancy speaking, or the people here fancy speaking, then you are more than welcome to let me know what it is you're interested in speaking about. But with that, we'll end the online part, and we'll see you all soon.